Yeah, my apologies. I had a lot of technical difficulties. Spent the last 25, 30 minutes trying to get this system online. For whatever reason, my Zoom system decided that it doesn't want to work today. So I finally got it up. It took a few reboots and a couple other technical troubleshooting steps, but we're good to go. I believe today is fight. I'm checking calendar right now. It's just been kind of a mad dash day for me.
It
Uh,
is.
Okay, cool. So, which is perfect because I just had this really deep conversation with somebody yesterday about this, especially in the state of the world, the apprehension around the world. Um, I don't have any red tape, any of the bureaucratic announcement stuff that I
Yeah.
normally do is zero. So I was just going to jump into it, um, especially because I'm really excited about something that I'm not supposed to talk about yet. So there's that.
There's
It's
that.
really hard to keep my mouth shut because I'm really excited for it. But just know there's something exciting coming. Um, but yeah, so I was having this conversation about the state of the world yesterday with somebody in my circle, and the conversation was around like World War III, what's coming, are we ready for if China invades, and all this stuff. And the reality is that Americans, as a general rule, are extremely uh, stubborn to put it mildly. Like we don't like being told what to do. We never have. It's just not our way. And every time we've had our back against the wall for whatever reason, we've responded by winning, not immediately, but inevitably. And so when you talk about um, the potential of the uh, the potential of what could take place should a third party country decide to invade the U.S. One of the things you have to realize is that there's a lot of steps that are going to take place before that happens. Um, it's not going to be like all of a sudden people are paratrooping in. Um, so that's just not likely to happen. But should it get to that point where we have people paratrooping in and we have missiles landing and bombs and all this other stuff, which we have quite a lot of technology in the U.S. that no other country has. Our entire country is founded and functions on the concept of um, military of war tribe. I mean, we like if you look at our budget as far as a nation, our federal budget goes primarily to our military. We actually outsource our military services to other countries that have smaller navies, have smaller air forces, they have smaller military units. We actually will send our people to them and run their security for a stipend, for a cost. And so that's a service we provide as a country. And so um, as part of that, our intelligence community and our military system has made it very apparent that we are the top level. Like we have put all of our money into that, all of our eggs are in that basket. A lot of people complain about the military industrial complex being too big and all this other stuff. And you can have your own personal opinion on that, but the reality is, should somebody invade, our military industrial complex is much larger than everybody else's. So we have different technologies that are 10, 15 years ahead of anybody else. And so we're seeing this right now in Russia and Ukraine, where they're coming out with jet fighters that are their stealth fighters. And I believe the last count was our stealth fighter capabilities here in the U.S. We have like 127 in production right now. Russia has 11 or 13 or something like that. Because they're extremely costly. They take a lot of money to build, but we as a nation are so successful, and our military industrial complex is such a large portion of our budget that we have, weaponry that far and above anybody else. So should an invasion start to come in, we have detection systems, we have immediate response systems that will take place. Now, if we go a little bit further beyond that, and say, those systems go down, EMP or whatever, we do actually have in home fighting. There's three things that I would very much make clear. One, the private citizens in the US own 48% of all the guns manufactured in the world. Not in the United States, 48% of the world is in the hands of private citizens. Now, why is that important? It is important to note because, one, That does not include federal, state, and local government firearms. That does not include the standing armies and militaries' weapons. That is only in the private citizens. So when you take into account the actual government and the actual like military, you're looking at closer to like 60% of the world's gun population, firearm population exists in the hands of un-Americans. Two, that's important to note because that means that civilians are used to being around weapons, trained with the weapons, maybe not as much as they should, but they do have them. They know what a pop sounds like. They know how to load it. They know how to use the function of it. So even if paratroopers are falling in from the sky, you have 48% of the civilian population already trained with firearms to some degree, already aware of firearms to some degree. And thirdly, the reason that's important is because also piggybacking off of number two, any other country in the world doesn't have private ownership of weapons. So that means even if they have a high population, we'll use China in this example, many people are like, China's population is so much higher than the US population. The problem is that even if they drafted everybody in China and armed everybody in China, they would actually have to train those people because they don't have private gun ownership. So they would have to get them used to gunfire. They would have to get them used to the mechanisms of that. So they wouldn't be viable as a soldier or as a combatant with a weapon in their hands, as far as people that have trained with it, have been around guns their whole life, or etc. So there's a shooter skill disparagement between a civilian population who doesn't have private ownership all of a sudden being told, here's a gun, go shoot. We saw this very prominently most recently in Ukraine. Whatever side you're on, whatever political view you have on the war in Ukraine and against Russia, they had to arm their citizens. But because Ukraine didn't have private gun ownership, these people all had to be trained, and they're not effective on the battlefield. They're not capable as a combative because they've never been around guns. It's awkward for them. They haven't done the rounds. They haven't done the reps. So they don't know trigger control, breath control. They don't know how to steady the aim. They don't know how to move and shoot. Like, these are mechanisms that are just hobbies here in the US. So when you look at those three issues as far as paratrooping in, those three things make it almost like you don't even have to worry about it, really. That doesn't mean you shouldn't worry about it, and you should be training, but you should be training for a lot of other reasons far before that takes place, so that when that takes place, that's just another reason that's already taken care of by your training. The second thing that I would say outside of the firearm piece, and the fact that I guess would be the third thing, outside of the firearm piece and outside of like, oh, like China's going to invade and we have weaponry and all this other stuff, is the reality is that, and we've seen this in Iraq, we've seen this in Afghanistan, the driver behind an invading force is far lower than the driving of a driver of a defending nation. And what I mean by that is the two main drivers behind an invading force that historically we've seen is, I don't want to die, so I'm gonna follow these orders and I'm gonna kill these people before I die, and I'm following orders, right? And so that driver, when compared up against, I'm fighting because this is my home and I will not give it up. This will be where I die or where my people live. And so 20 years, a lot of people are talking about like the gun control argument is like, oh, if you're going to go up against the government, you're going to need more than AR-15. Well, that's just not true. 20 years, the Iraqi and Afghani forces, a bunch of people in flip-flops with AKs and RPGs held off the greatest military force known to man in the history of the world. So driver is a very potent part of the equation that a lot of people underestimate. Same thing in 1776 when we fought off the British, and again in 1812 when we fought off the British, in the French-Indian War when we fought off the French, flip that, where the French-Indian War took place, where we were fighting the French and we were combating with both natives and French. This is our home. And so that driver drives us to do more because there's no tomorrow if you don't. So it's literally a kill or be killed situation, as opposed to if you're just an invading force, like you could always go home if things start to go south. Additionally, with an invading force, you have supply chains that are necessary. You have issues with weather that in terrain that you're not used to. We're aware of this. And so with all that being said, this conversation started with the state of the world and the politics of the world. And yes, the US is very divided right now. And there is very much a degradation in nationalism, and positive nationalism. We're probably one of the few countries, if not the only country, that teaches our people to hate their own country. That's a problem. And beyond that, you have a bunch of identity politics splintering people into these various warring tribes, whether that's gender politics, whether that's race politics, whether that's Democrat versus Republican. You have all these splintering systems. But one of the things that I tell people a lot is the best thing that could ever happen in a situation like that is an invading force. Because the minute an invading force happens, all of the people that have a combined, have had a splintered existence, they have had a splintered identity, those things fall away because now they have a common enemy. So it won't matter if identity, race, whatever. This is our country. And so the best thing that could happen really for a nation, and we saw this with 9/11 as a prime example. We had all this splintering happening up to November 10th or September 10th, 2001, and then September 11th happened, and September 12th, everybody was united, everybody was hugging, high-fiving, everything's great because we're now all Americans, which is what we should be perpetuating when we're interacting with people. We should be all Americans. We should not be an African American or a Caucasian American or an Asian American. You should be American. And then if you want to connect culturally with different things, whether that's African or Asian or white culture or whatever you want to do, then fine, but it should never trump or go above the American construct. And I've had this conversation many times with people in my family where they're like, we should have open borders because that'll stop the wars. It's like, no. When you have open borders, you start to vie for resources because you have no way of articulating a priority set. National identity is extremely critical to survival across the board. You can have splintered identity down below, but national identity is where it's at. And an invading force effectively forces the national identity. It forces an ideological common ground. And so one of the best things that could happen, while not from a physical experience, because the traumas of war and the blood of war is very, very bad, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I hope that we can wake up and pull our heads out of our asses far before that happens. That would be the fastest catalyst to bringing the nation together would be to have an invading force. Now, that all being said, and I hope that gives you guys some parallels to draw on to realize that it's not as critical as you think it is. It's not like Chinese are at the door, despite what a lot of people are trying to push. And even if they are, that could be the best thing that could happen because it's going to unify the country. It will stop all this political garbage and rhetoric, and we would probably reestablish a new government based on that new construct. But you should be training. And it shouldn't matter if it's government tyranny. It shouldn't matter if it's invading force. It shouldn't matter if it's political dissent. It shouldn't matter if it's just you don't want to get mugged, or if you do get mugged, you know how to handle it. You should be doing the reps. You should be training. You should be physically capable. You should be armed. You should know how to use that weapon. You should have some self-defense techniques somewhere, whether that's mace, force multiplier like a weapon or a knife. And you should be able to hold on to that weapon in the event of an altercation. Because I see a lot of people that don't train, they just carry, they end up having their weapons taken from them and pistol whip. My dad did that. We were sitting at a bus stop when I was about 14. He and I were sitting at a bus stop, and this guy was getting really mouthy with my dad. My dad told him to stop. Guy pulls a pistol out on my dad. My dad just takes the gun from him and pistol whips him with it, just beats the hell out of him, just for the principle that he pulled a gun on my dad. So if you're not training with it, you're just carrying a weapon for the attacker. And that's the mindset you should have. If you're not training to hold on to that weapon, to use it proficiently, to use it efficiently, all you're doing is bringing an extra weapon to the fight for the bad guy. And another thing that I like to tell people is if you're not training, if you're not getting the reps in, if you're not putting the time and energy in, then you're just training for your death. How you train is how you will die. If you train proficiently, you train often, you train with those reps, and you get into altercations, and you know you can handle yourself, and you're proficient to some degree, then you're training to die well. You may not win. That's just the reality. I know men that are very proficient in violence. They've been in spec ops, they've done this, and they've died. And it's just the way of the world. Just bad things can happen. But at least you know that they fought to the last breath when they died, as opposed to dying poorly, getting killed by their own weapon, which would be a really poor way to die. Dying in front of your family with no fight, that'd be a really poor way to die. Sacrificing your children would be a poor way to live. I heard a story recently where a guy, they had, I think it was a carjacking or something, and the guy got so scared he left his 6-year-old in the back seat with the carjacker, just bolted, had no care about the child whatsoever. If you're not managing your panic response, if you're not controlling your understanding of what could and can happen, if you're not managing your skill set, then those are the kinds of ways that you can live poorly and die poorly. And so that's kind of how I frame my mindset when it comes to training. Like, it's a balancing act, right? I have business. I put a lot of time into my business. I have day job. I have a lot of time in my day job. I want to be healthy. But how much time am I allocating to what? And am I proficient? Am I not a proficient? How am I going to die? Am I going to die well? Or am I going to die poor? Am I going to die without a fight, or am I going to die with a fight? And so those kind of things, it just takes reps, the repetition and thought process. And so all of this stuff, all this big picture stuff, World War III, China, all that stuff, if you're training to die well, if you're training to protect your people, if you're training to be functional and fundamentally capable, all that other stuff gets taken care of on its own, right? The best thing that we could have is the Chinese parachuting in the Appalachian Mountains, and a bunch of rednecks will kill them before they even make it anywhere else in the United States. Like, why? Because they train constantly. You know, as a society, we make fun of the rednecks and the hicks, and they're just about their guns and blah, 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 blah. We talk a lot of smack, but the reality is they're the ones that are going to be saving your ass if you don't train. So, you know, to end it on this note, like, it doesn't matter what's happening in the world, you should be training in some way. You should be training. And if you're not, this is your wake up call. It's time to get training. I took my mom to go shooting for the first time for Mother's Day. She absolutely fell in love with it. I took her on Monday. She went through all my ammo. She loved it so much. I had to go get new ammo, which is pretty impressive because I had quite a lot. But she shot really well. She took coaching. She took guidance. Is she the best? Absolutely not. It was her first time shooting, but she was better than everybody that was at that range that day, empirically, based on the targets. And she was startled by the pops. You know, when we first walked in the range, you hear the pops of the gun. She's jumping. By the end of it, she's excited because she now knows what it takes mechanically. So, you know, being around it also helps. Put yourself in those positions. It's very uncomfortable. My mom was very nervous, but she trusted me. So find people you trust and get training. Everything else takes care of itself. I'm like a robot. I can't understand you. What's weird is it said you're muted, but I can hear you talking. I am so confused. I cannot understand.
Let's see.
The only thing I clearly heard was "let's see." Hopefully she'll be able to hop back on and we'll be able to hear her.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. But now I can't.
Now I can't. As soon as you start talking important stuff.
My thought was just going to be like what you said. We don't have to worry about the thing, but that reminds me of stuff. Like, is it possible? Like, oh, how about these resources that are going to there's incoming? Or would we, because there's enough corruption out there that, you know,
And she's done. I think she was trying to say something in regards to like the end all. Keep like dropping and coming back on. I think you're on now. But I'm not hearing you. What's also strange is it says you have full bars, so I have no idea why it's doing that. Wonder if it's the recording thing. I just texted her. Give it a couple more minutes and then if not, I'll go ahead and end it because I do have a hard stop at 12. And I do apologize for being late today. I recently had to go through a huge shift on my laptop because it's getting deprecated by Apple because it's a 9-year-old laptop. So that's probably adding to my technical issues as well. Oh, okay, she's not going to hop back on. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Hope you got something out of this, whether it's peace or some re-intentionality around training. It doesn't have to be big things that you're training. Just get the reps in. I was talking to my parents. They were saying that they want to get into shooting more often, and it's too expensive. And I was explaining that there are economic ways to train. You can put a single round in the chamber with a full mag, and then switch it to an empty mag, and you can start, slide lock train, where you shoot one round, slide lock, reset the mag, and shoot one round, and now you're getting reps in without spending whole magazines worth of ammo. So definitely stay sovereign, guys. Keep training, and if you guys have any questions around drills or how to prioritize whether it's your workouts to keep you combat ready, or your reps that you should be training, how to train with knives, how to train with martial arts, what kind of martial arts you should get into, feel free to pop it into the portal and we'll have a good discussion. A lot of guys in there that really do know how to handle stuff, former cops and things of that nature. So there's a lot of people in the portal that can help you. Thanks, everyone.